the people in positions of power, they're pretty messed up, aren't they? Like all of these things that go on that seem to plug into royalty, into politics, into entertainment, into the music industry, arts, films, and so on. They're starting to at least acknowledge that these things go on. So what they did with the Savile situation is they got everyone to look at the past. They got everyone to look retrospectively look at these abhorrent things that happened, but they definitely don't still happen now. You know, they did the same when they looked into other BBC presenters and other people in politics like Leon Britton, Lord McAlpine, and so on, Lord Mountbatten. And I think they're going to try and do the same thing with Epstein. They're going to look at all these people that were relevant, you know, your Clintons and Obamas and formerly Prince Andrew and others. But who's the Epstein of today? And if energy harvesting is real, which I think the evidence that it is so overwhelming, then a state of fear releases a certain type of energy. And if you're feeding off of that, then you want to obviously create as many environments as you can to create that emotion. The people that really, really matter to these people still have their identities and what they've been up to protected. They throw a few low-level gophers under the bus, and that satisfies people. But the irony is, if they did, if everyone in the world stopped buying Coke, they'd be bankrupt in 2.5 days.
Yeah.
That's the power. That's how tenuous their control and their grip on our society is. Know that just announcing it is going to get you backlash, then it's a good idea to announce something that's far more drastic than you actually want to do. Because then, in the public eye, you concede some ground, but you've still got what you wanted. And I think if you look at yourself as a leader, where you're leading by example, by wanting to stand up and wanting to take responsibility and wanting to be the person bringing solutions, not with an ego hero type complex, more of a, I want to do something that matters.
So, welcome back to the Live, Love, Learn podcast. And you are in for a treat today, because I don't think any of us can deny 2026 has certainly gone off with a bang. The Epstein files, yes, we are still talking about the Epstein trials, digital ID conversations, and really growing conversations about who really holds the power. And certainly one question that I want to be talking about today is, are we actually witnessing disclosure, or is it just another deeper level of control? So for years, we've been called conspiracy theorists. We still are, but now the documents have been released, or some of them are, which is quite an important fact. Is the truth finally coming out, or is it just another carefully managed narrative? These are just some of the things we are going to be talking about with my guest today. So Jamie Ike, many of you will recognize him, famous face, famous name. And Jamie is the CEO of Ickonic, an independent media platform dedicated to exploring ideas, perspectives, and conversations that are not often allowed on mainstream outlets. Jamie is a passionate advocate for critical thinking, personal freedom, health awareness, and really, really importantly, the role of family and how we need to be really looking at that moving forward. So a big welcome, Jamie. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you. Very, very good, Catherine. Not enjoying this dreadful English winter that we're having, just continuous rain and cold. But apart from that, can't complain.
Do you know, just before, we're British, so for those American or foreign listeners, we have to always talk about the weather. I've
Yep.
had horses since I was 14, and trust me, that was a long while ago, all rescues. And anyone who has horses could tell you the weather patterns of any winter, because it's so important about feed, ground conditions, rugs. And this year has just been the worst ever.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I'm exhausted with it. I've got three really old horses now, and I'm worn out. So I need some
Yeah.
sun. I need some sun. But 2026, Jamie, it's really kicked off with a bang. Let's start with the Epstein files. What's your take on what we're seeing?
Well, I think there's a variety of ways that you can look at it. You can look at it and say that Trump campaigned on releasing them and then said they didn't exist, said they did exist, said there was nothing to see, all of those things. You had a lot of American commentators, particularly ones that seem to be aligned with Israel, the likes of Ben Shapiro and others, saying there was nothing in them, there was nothing to see, they didn't really care, they weren't important. But people didn't give up. People kept, pursuing the release of these files. They wanted answers. So you could argue that the pressure of that has led to the release of these. The other argument, I suppose, you could say, as you said in your intro, is this, are they releasing what they are choosing to release? So what's in the files is obviously important, but what's equally as important is what's not in these particular files that have been released, and what names, dates and places do they have we're not allowed to know, or not, they're not comfortable public people knowing about it on a wide scale. Researchers, people that have researched into this will know about it anyway. I said that on a show I did on Monday, that none of these revelations in these files to people who have researched has come as a surprise. There's nothing really in this release that anyone's particularly shocked by, but for the general public who have denied, dismissed the fact that these things go on, it's a massive revelation what we're seeing now. So I guess there's two different ways you could look at it. It's, on one level, this is fantastic because it's, as I said, it's getting more people that would have called us conspiracy theorists and crazy a couple of years ago, even a couple of months ago. It's getting them to start to actually go, hang on a minute, the people in positions of power, they're pretty messed up, aren't they? Like all of these things that go on that seem to plug into royalty, into politics, into entertainment, into the music industry, arts, films, and so on. They're starting to at least acknowledge that these things go on. So on that side, it's a really good thing. What I think is very important, and I remember a few years ago when the revelations about Jimmy Savile in this country became more public, is what happens next, I think, is really, really important. So what they did with the Savile situation is they basically obviously highlighted what Savile was up to a degree, didn't highlight who he tied into particularly, namely the now king.
Mm.
And also they went after a lot of people that were already dead, or people that were already, very elderly at the time. They didn't talk about what was still going on today. I have no doubt there is a Jeffrey Epstein of the 2026 year going on, still doing exactly what he was doing right now, somewhere in America, somewhere in Britain,
Yeah.
somewhere in the Middle East. I have no doubt about that. So what they did with the Savile situation is they got everyone to look at the past. They got everyone to look retrospectively look at these abhorrent things that happened, but they definitely don't still happen now. They did the same when they looked into other BBC presenters and other people in politics like Leon Britton, Lord McAlpine, and so on, Lord Mountbatten. And I think they're going to try and do the same thing with Epstein. They're going to look at all these people that were relevant, your Clintons and Obamas and formerly Prince Andrew and others. But who's the Epstein of today? That's what I'm interested about. And who does he tie into that's still active, that still has a prominent role in the world that we see today? Obviously, Mandelson's probably the most obvious one that we've seen in recent time, certainly in the last week in this country anyway. But I'm always interested in if we're finding something out, there's usually a reason we're allowed to find this out. Obviously, things do leak and things do come out, but the fact that this many documents have come out and they've all come out at once, I think that there's a reason behind it. And if we always use the expression "the world's a stage," well, things on stages are always scripted. They're never organic. They're very rarely ad lib. It's highly unlikely that this is a case of someone's gone rogue and gone off script and decided to release these files. I would suggest they've been released on purpose to create a certain outcome, and the information that's not within them, of which I would say there would be a lot that would relate to the current US president. That's done for a reason as well. So you could look at this from many different perspectives. Could this be a warning to people in positions of power right now that they have stuff on that, if you don't keep in line, this is what will happen to you? Very possible. Could it be a case of the vibration of the planet is rising to such a point that disclosure is happening and it's unstoppable? I'd like to believe that one personally. I think that's the ideal solution, and this is just the beginning. But I always am skeptical when these things happen as to what the true motives behind them are.
I agree with all of that. And I think it's really important to, I talk quite a lot about we've got to drop this black and white thinking that it's this or that. It could be all of those things. And one of the things that I'd like your opinion on, we talk a lot about the energy harvesting and the loosh. And as you said, there's some people that have been researching this for years, so there's nothing new that's been disclosed in these files. In fact, there's a lot that hasn't. They haven't, well, from the bits I've seen, they haven't even touched on the cloning side of things, for example. But for a lot of people that are hearing this for the first time, there's a lot of fear, a lot of outrage, a lot of attention that they're putting on that. And that is a huge energy harvest opportunity. What do you think about that side of things?
Yep, I completely agree. Any form of catastrophic event, whether that's a terror attack, whether that's a financial crash, whether that's the cost of living, or whether that's something like this that's putting fear in people's minds, that's absolutely going to create energy. Because I think what's really important, obviously, you understand this, I'm sure your audience will as well, from the health perspective, that everything in the body is an energy.
Mm.
And you obviously see the symptoms of that in how someone's facial expressions might be, for example, in terms of if somebody's scared, you can normally tell. But what you don't see is the energetic level of that in the unseen. You don't see what frequency these people are giving off. You don't see what type of vibration they're giving off or receiving when they're in a state of fear or happiness or anxiety or all those various different emotions. And if energy harvesting is real, which I think the evidence that it is so overwhelming, then a state of fear releases a certain type of energy. And if you're feeding off of that, then you want to obviously create as many environments as you can to create that emotion. And that's why if you look right across the world in so many different instances, whether it be fear of war, whether it be fear of famine, fear of contaminated water, fear of somebody shooting you down the road, fear of paying the bills, whatever it is, there's fear consistently in pretty much every society. I would confidently predict that 99% of people in their daily lives experience fear at some point during the day.
Yeah.
Whether it's mild, whether it's severe, whatever it might be. And that's creating an energy. So with these Epstein file releases and reading, and like I said, to people who have been researching this isn't new, but it's still bizarre and very disturbing to read out loud. And I covered on a Monday show I did one of the files in particular that related to Father George Bush, and I was reading reading the body of this email, and I found myself having to take a pause every 3 or 4 words because it was so demonic and so dark. And as somebody that has young children and somebody who, I work as a football coach on the weekend for a kids team, an under fives team, I love spending time with kids. They've got such amazing energy and such an amazing view of the world with that innocence. To think that there's people out there that do these kinds of things, and not only do it, they get off on it.
Mm.
It's so incomprehensible to kind of understand as somebody, as most of us are, that are not like that. And it's very dark and it's very demonic. And I can see how people reading that, including myself, get in a state of fear.
Yeah.
And you have that kind of nurture fear instinct of protecting your own children from obviously things like that happening. And I can completely understand why people feel in a state of fear when they read these, because if those people who are in the positions of power and influence are capable of that, then what are they capable of to you and I?
Yeah.
So I can completely understand why there's that state of fear as a result. And as you said with energy harvesting, that's not accidental. That's completely by design.
Yeah. Do you think we're sort of at a bit of a standoff now because let me explain this a bit clearer. This is coming out, but the fact that it's coming out to the public, the people behind the scenes, like in the FBI, and all the other intelligence agencies that are so obviously linked, have known about this for years, and yet we haven't seen any arrests. These people are still walking free. It's Jimmy Savile all over again. And I think this is one of the things is there's the whole system is so corrupt, the judicial system, the political system, the media. Do you think we're at a stage now where we've got a little bit of this standoff between people know it and the ones who are in those files doing these things and the ones that we don't even know of that have come after Jeffrey Epstein? Do you think it's a bit of a, well, what are you going to do about it, people? Because the Clintons are still walking free.
Yeah.
That none of these people have been held to account.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at it. One is what you're saying there, which is they're so emboldened now and they're very comfortable with you knowing that there's two
Mm.
worlds, because like you said there, what are you going to do about it? It's still happening. Mandelson's not going to see the inside of a jail cell.
Yeah.
Um, So what are you going to do about it? And then that what that creates is that creates an apathy eventually within people towards
Mm,
these things, where it's just, the whole resistance is futile type argument. What's the point? I know this goes on, but what am I going to do about it? I'm just sat here in a house in Derby. What can I do about it?
mm.
So there's that aspect to it. And the other thing is, eventually, because of the research done by large swathes of the alternative media, there does come a point when things are undeniable anymore. And what's the key then is controlling the narrative. So to use a simple example of, you mentioned at the top of the show about family, to use a simple example, if someone's having an affair and you're going to get caught, it's probably a lot better for your partner to find out from you than from a friend.
Yeah.
So, because you're controlling the narrative in theory. If my wife watches this, she's going to wonder what I'm up to. But why I thought of that analogy.
Yeah.
But it's a simple one that people can understand. So, if you've got an overwhelming amount of evidence that is out there now for people to find, and there's a lot more people questioning what's going on and questioning if something has some validity here, and you can apply this to lots of things over the years. This is just the current one. If you continue to let people have conversations, you continue to let them speculate, they're going to come to conclusions based on the evidence, and that might not necessarily be what you want them to conclude. So you control the narrative. That's why we've said for a long time, if ever there's any form of disclosure into ETs,
Mm.
whatever you're told by the mainstream, probably the US government out of the Pentagon, is not going to be the truth. They're going to be controlling that narrative when it gets to the point that they can't deny it anymore. So I think it's the same with this, is that people know just from the basics of, let's say, the Prince Andrew example here in this country, they know who Jeffrey Epstein is. They know he tied into a lot of powerful people, a lot of people were calling out his connections to the Clintons and, other people in America. By controlling the narrative and releasing these files, as I said in the first question, you're getting people to see what you want them to see and not see what you don't want them to see. It's like as they say with the magician, while they're doing a trick in this hand, they want you looking over here. And I would suggest that's potentially something that's going on, is rather than say nothing's going on, continue to speculate people. They go, yep, something is going on. You guys, researchers, you are absolutely right. Here's what's going on. By the
Yeah.
way, this is about 10% of what's going on. So the other 90 still gets hidden. The people that really matter to these people still have their identities and what they've been up to protected. They throw a few low-level gophers under the bus, and that satisfies people. It's the whole chuck a few breadcrumbs to people and tell them they're right, which I think is one of the biggest dangers we face as a human race, is people love to be told they're right.
Oh,
They don't want to be
completely.
told they're wrong. And that's why so many people have doubled down on Trump and Musk and Q and things like that, because they don't want to admit they may have been duped. So they double down on the loser rather than admit that actually maybe they called that one wrong, which is not a sign of weakness for me. It's a sign of strength to stand up and say, you know what, I got that one wrong in the light of new evidence. I think differently now. So that's a possibility, is that all these people now are going, see, we were right. We said Epstein was up to this and up to
Yeah.
that. There you go. But then they stop there and they don't continue the research and the investigation of, okay, there's 3 million files been released. There's probably another 10 million. So where are they? Who do they name? What pictures do they contain? And that would be my hope, is that people are so outraged by this that they take this as a step one on the ladder of exposing what's really going on.
Yeah, great points, because I've been so disappointed. I've just been speaking to a few people who wouldn't listen to podcasts like this week, and I've been quite surprised how many people are still thinking the whole Epstein, in the mainstream, are still thinking the whole Epstein is just involving adult prostitutes and almost blaming the women. Absolutely
Yeah.
shocking, because of course that's the narrative that has come out. And people saying, well, these are just prostitutes. It's just horrific, like having underage sex and calling it an affair. Well, you don't
Yeah.
have an affair with a child. So do you think people are still going to be talking about this in 6 months' time, or do you think it's a phase and then it's going to be on to the next dramatic thing for everyone to put their attention on?
I think it depends what the two things. It depends how much people like us continue to talk about it. I think
Mm,
that's key, because there's so many things to talk about. We could have sat and done this podcast for an hour and talked about 100 different
literally.
topics that have happened in 2026, to be fair. So it's a case of people continuing to highlight it, not giving up, not backing down. So that's a big one, and that's the job of us as the alternative media. The other thing is, if they want to bury this, then they will try by creating things that in people's minds are more important in that moment. So if you remember on 9/11, on September the 11th, 2001, there was a story here in Great Britain where Tony Blair, the then Prime Minister, said this is a great day to bury bad news. And I bet nobody could tell me what that bad news story was from that day, because obviously the headlines were dominated by 9/11. The same day, the Pentagon, the day before, on September the 10th, admitted there was like a $2.5 trillion black hole of money where they didn't know where it was. And then all of a sudden, no one was talking about that 24 hours later. So I would say that if they want this story to die down, then they will create a narrative that something else is more important that affects more people's lives, because a lot of people will be reading these Epstein files and go, okay, this is crazy, this is disgusting what these people are up to, but how does it affect me sat in my life today? How does it affect me? So if there's something that's created that affects somebody more, whether that be a big one would be the cost of living, that kind of affects everyone.
Yeah.
If there's a major global war, that would affect everyone. If there's run on currencies, if there's a civil war, whatever it might be, that's going to affect people more likely on a daily basis than reading these Epstein files. So me and Gareth were saying when these files came out, like, what's he going to do? Is he going to invade Iran? Is he going to invade Colombia? Is the dollar going to crash? Is crypto going to crash? Or are they going to nuke Russia? What's going to happen? Something's probably going to happen to divert attention away from these files. So it's going to be a challenge because, as we've said, we're sat here now, 34, 35 days into the new year, and there's already been so many news stories that you would expect to hear in 6 to 9 to 12 months all happen in the space of 35, 36 days. Who knows what that's going to look like on the 1st of March, 1st of April. So they're going to chuck everything at us this year. I mean, we predicted this at the back end of last year that 26 was going to get spicy. It was going to get very challenging. But with challenges come opportunities, because, reading this information that's come out this week is very dark. It's very challenging. But the opportunity that comes with it is that people can't deny, certainly not deny without consciously denying it, by putting their head in the sand, that these sort of things go on. So I would hope people are still talking about this, and I'd hope we'll be going one step further and more heads will be rolling and more names will be being exposed.
Yeah, I so hope so, and I hope that we see people brought to justice for it, whatever that means. I mean, I know you can't make amends for what's happened, but you can actually, if this comes out and they keep being seen to get away with it, it's ridiculous. Now,
Yep.
talking about changing tact a bit, something that we were both talking about hugely last year, of course, which is still very much in the pipeline and going ahead, is the digital ID. And we've seen the announcement in the UK, which has gone largely untalked about, the 15-minute city going ahead
Yep.
in Oxford. So where are you at with all that, and what do you think people need to be aware of?
Well, I think the key with digital ID is that the U-turn, which everybody celebrated, and understandably so, that it wasn't going to be mandatory or compulsory by the end of the Parliament, is that doesn't mean it's going away.
Mm,
So there's already a digital ID being rolled out. If you're a company director here in the
yeah.
UK, from the 18th of November last year, you were forced essentially to give biometric data to submit anything to Companies House.
Mm,
Now, lots of companies, including our own, have been creative in terms of getting around that, but they're going to keep coming. Veterans, for example, the veterans card for them to receive their benefits, that has to be taken in the form of a digital ID. The right to work, I'm sure, will be a major one they'll come at. So what they'll do is they'll probably try and pick groups off individually, because when you come at a whole population as a whole, there's the fault lines of division are dropped in many cases, as we saw through lockdowns.
mm,
People forgot about those fault lines and they just all opposed it in unity. Whereas if you're targeting individual groups, unless that's your group, a lot of people will remain very quiet. So if they target groups to begin with that not a lot of people have got any skin in the game for, so company directors, there's this perception that, they're all millionaires. Why do I care what
yeah.
they have to do? Well, that's not the case. Most people that run companies are barely getting by. If they target veterans, I'm not a veteran. I don't know any, so it doesn't really affect me. A big one we're expecting to be targeted soon is football fans and sports stadiums. I'm not a football fan or a football hooligan, so it doesn't really affect me. And before you know it, you've got a third, half, three quarters of the population, and it's become pretty much widespread without you making it mandatory. So that's one possibility. The other one is if you're going to do something that you know is going to be very unpopular, and digital ID is incredibly unpopular, whether it's compulsory, mandatory, voluntary, it's incredibly unpopular. If you know that just announcing it is going to get you backlash, then it's a good idea to announce something that's far more drastic than you actually want to do. Because then in the public eye, you concede some ground, but you've still got what you wanted. It's like, it's like a negotiation. If I want to sell my car for £100, I put it up for 150.
Yeah.
And they might offer me 100, and they think they've got a good deal, but I've got what I was expecting. So that I don't think they thought they would get a compulsory digital ID through from nowhere. I don't think they thought they would do that. So all these people that are saying, we've won the war, we haven't won the war. We've laid a glove on them to start with, but we certainly haven't won because this is still being rolled out. And once it's rolled out, once all the technology in the form of facial recognition, all the IT structural technology and architecture that's going to need to be built to handle a digital ID, once that's there, all of a sudden it's very simple to go from voluntary to mandatory, and that be very quick. All that technology that was built through the lockdowns of track and trace and all of that, that wasn't built for a 3-week lockdown.
Exactly.
The amount of, I know just from my own experience of friends of mine that work in IT, I know how much money was floating around for developers in that period. You're talking people fresh out of university with no experience in junior programming, getting offered contracts of £60,000 to £80,000 a year. That's utterly insane. There was, senior developers on £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 a day. No, obviously that's completely overcorrected now. However, that money was floating around to build the very architecture that is needed for this thing to be administered. So it's there. The idea that they have to wait till the end of the parliament to build the tech to make digital ID a reality is not the case at all. They have to soften public opinion enough that enough people voluntarily take it up. So I would suggest that they never expected to get this through. I think that this cult play a very, very long game. And if you're going to try and sell something that's incredibly unpopular, you'd want someone relatively popular to try and sell it. That's not Starmer. Starmer is held in contempt by most people, including the people that voted for him. So if you're going to try and get through a policy that's already going to be unpopular, why would you have someone like him being the salesman? So I kind of look at it this way, is that it's almost inevitable, unless something changes, that Reform are going to be the next government and Nigel Farage will be the next prime minister. Well, Farage is seen as the British Trump, isn't he? He's seen as this anti-establishment figure who we can trust. He's one of us. He stands in the pub with an England shirt on having a pint when the Euros are on. He's one of us. Well, he's a much better guy to try and sell your dystopia, isn't he, than Keir Starmer, in the same way Trump has done this in America. So I would suggest that the Britannia card or the Brit card that Reform have spoken about is the digital ID in another name. And because they claim it's going to be used to help solve immigration, well, no one believes Labour want to change immigration, but people believe that Reform do. Because Farage has been a campaigner his whole career on immigration. And that's what I mean by playing the long game. I would suggest that if Farage becomes Prime Minister, he's been lined up for that for probably the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And he's been constantly positioned as an outsider. And all of a sudden, then he's an outsider in a position of power and we can trust him. That's going to be people's mindset. And another ridiculous thing is just by changing the name from ID, digital ID, to Brit card, you'll get a lot of the Tommy fanatics that will all of a sudden be on board.
Let me get my Brit card.
Yeah, they'll all of a sudden be on board.
Yeah.
Because marketing is everything, as they say, and that's just a marketing trick. So I actually think in a weird way, having Starmer as the salesman for this is a good thing, because he's so unpopular. People will be very skeptical. People will ask questions. If you put somebody in front of them who they like, who they think is on their side, and they sell something like this, I think they're less likely to ask questions, which is that whole better the devil you know. type thing, isn't it? That you know that these people in positions of power right now don't work for us. So you ask questions. You are skeptical. You're very questioning of everything they are trying to put forward. So I hope that something like that continues if someone like Reform and Farage take power. But the 15-minute city one that you mentioned, I remember going to a protest in Oxford a few years ago, when it was first sort of discussed as being one of the initial testing places for 15-minute cities, which again, that's a testing point. And if they roll that out there, Oxford's a very woke city.
Mm.
It's also a city full of international students, so it's got a high turnover of people. It's a cycling city anyway, pretty much. It's not a massive city. You would use your car
No,
in
not
it
at all.
in a lot anyway. So I would suggest that they'll probably use that like, as the testing point. They'll claim it's been a success, and then they'll use that as the blueprint to roll out to other places. Just like I said they would do in Australia with a social media ban. I said
Mm.
they'd say it was a success, and then they'd roll it out here, and that lasted about 2 weeks before they started talking about it. So I would expect them to take somewhere like Oxford as the guinea pig. Say it's been great. It's all of these things have happened. People are more prosperous. CO2's gone down. There's less road traffic accidents. Kids are breathing cleaner air. All those things that they will claim to try and get public opinion on their side to support it, and then they'll target more and more places.
Completely. You raised a really important point there about the playing the long game. And, people that study mind control, Jason Christoph is an expert on teaching about this, talk about a lot about the adult game where people plan long term, and most people, because of the stresses that they're all under of day-to-day living and the stresses that have been deliberately put on them, are very much still acting like children in terms of short
Yeah.
term, month to month to month. And I can absolutely see why people are like that, because it is stressful.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts about how all of us can really start, look, we can't sort of win this battle of good against evil if we still are playing the short childlike brain action and they're continually playing the long game. What is your thoughts on that, about what people can actually do to understand that and understand their own personal responsibility about changing, away from the short term sort of gains to the long term plan?
Mhm. Yeah, well, everything in life that's worth doing invariably takes time. Whether that's taking care of your health, whether that's building a business, whether that's having a healthy relationship, friendships, a good relationship with your kids, whatever it is, most things take time, they take effort, they take hours, and sometimes they take short-term pain for long-term benefit, long-term solutions. You see somebody on the beach with a six-pack, they've worked for hours of pain and time they probably didn't want to do to get that. It wasn't all, happy days to get there. For every marriage that's, been around for 30, 40 years celebrating golden anniversaries, they've had a fair few arguments along the way to get there. All those things that to build a business, you've had to deal with times you probably thought you were going under, or times you've had to change and pivot ideas because your plans haven't worked. And I think it's the same with this. This isn't going to be easy. This is not going to be something that we are going to overcome in 5 minutes and then all go to the pub and celebrate. This is going to have to be a consistent, long term refusal to cooperate with anything that is not for the benefit of humanity. And I'm not talking, anarchy.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, okay, so they want to roll out a digital ID, right? If 500,000 people in the country refuse to do it, they can pick off 500,000 people bit by bit through their employers, through blocking their access to whatever it might be. Okay, what if 50 million people refuse to do it? What are they doing then? They're doing absolutely nothing. They have absolutely no power. You can apply that argument to everything. If Starmer stands up today and says we're going to war with Russia,
Mm.
and 500 soldiers refuse to fight, well, they'll send the other hundreds of thousands. What if the whole military go, no, I'm not doing it? You
Yeah.
want to fight Putin, mate? You get on a plane and you go and get in an octagon with him yourself. Well, where's their power? There's 650 MPs. There's roughly an MP for every, I think the number is around 150,000 people in this country. Obviously, that includes children, so not everyone that votes, but I think it's around 150,000 roughly.
Mm.
Well, 72 million divided by 650. Sure, someone listening will work that out. It's ridiculous the amount of power that we give them,
Mm.
and they only have it because we accept it. So you can apply that argument to pretty much everything. So those two examples I've given, digital ID and conflict. Well, what about your health?
Yeah.
What if people stopped buying this processed food? Well, those companies need to make money. They need to make profit. They need to be bringing in revenue to survive. Well, if no one buys their stuff, they're not going to be around for much longer.
Mm.
If people stop going and having their COVID vaccine, people start asking more questions about other childhood vaccines. And I guarantee if they did, a lot would then go, not for me. People don't go and buy these toxic supplements and vitamins and things you find in your local pharmacy. All of a sudden, where's their power? They don't have any. So I would say, and that's not going to happen in 5 minutes. I don't expect every single person in the country to all of a sudden stop buying Coca-Cola, for example. But the irony is, if they did, if everyone in the world stopped buying Coke, they'd be bankrupt in 2.5 days.
Yeah.
That's the power. That's how tenuous their control and their grip on our society is. That's why they have to manipulate. That's why they have to gaslight people. That's why they have to threaten and belittle people. And that's why the big one, which is an area I think we both have a massive interest in, is making people feel small. Because if you feel small, what's the point in resisting? Because I'm small, I'm little me, I can't do anything about it. I have all these thoughts and I don't like this, but what can I do about it? I have no actual power. That's the mindset they want people to have. But every single one of us has all the power that we want to have. And we don't need to do anything drastic apart from embodying everything that we believe. If you want to live in a world that's peaceful, live a peaceful life. You want to live in a world where everybody is friendly to each other and respects each other. Well, treat everyone that you interact with that mindset. Mm. Because you never know how many people you're influencing, positively or negatively, by just being yourself. Like I find this yesterday, it's a segue slightly, but yesterday I was at my local shop and there was a young kid buying something and paying and so on himself. And he was relatively young. I'd probably say like 7 or 8 maybe. And he was so articulate and he was so polite to the lady behind the counter, you know, asked for a carrier bag. Oh, thank you. Have a nice day. That myself, the lady behind the counter and the other 2 checkouts here with people paying for stuff all looked at each other and went, someone's been raised right, haven't they? What a very pleasant young man. And it just by him being like that, all 4 of us took note. And I think you can apply that to everything. You know, if you I find myself doing this when you're on family holidays or when you're at soft plays or places with my family and my kids. You know, you observe other families and you think how they look like they're all getting on great. You know, what a really cool family they are. They've all got a really cool dynamic. You know, the kids are all playing together, the parents are getting. And equally, you look at other families and you everyone's sat on their phones, no one's interacting, people look completely separated, and you're impacting positively or negatively just by being yourself. So I would say the first place to start is the mirror. Have a strong conversation with yourself about having backbone and standing up for your principles. Because I'm a believer on a spiritual level that every time you concede something morally that you don't really want to do, or you're quiet about something that you care about, spiritually a bit of us dies. And I think if you do that long enough, you can destroy yourself from within. As Martin Luther King, I think, said, we die the day we become silent about things that matter. And I think that's most of us, because most of us look and go, it's not worth my time. It's not worth my effort. It's not worth the hassle because I can just walk away. Like how many people would see, you know, someone getting mugged in the street and carry on walking past?
Yeah.
Because they don't want to put themselves in that dangerous situation potentially. You know, oh, they might have a knife, they might have a gun, they might have whatever. Whereas I think, you know, for me, I'd like to think in that situation, I'd be straight in trying to help somebody without, you know, thinking of the consequences, which might not end well. But that's just my mindset. And I think if you look at yourself as a leader, where you're leading by example, by wanting to stand up and wanting to take responsibility and wanting to be the person bringing solutions, not with an ego hero type complex, more of a, you know, I want to do something that matters. I want to stand for something. I want to have morals and I want to stand on them. And I think certainly as a man, as a young man myself, in a real masculinity crisis, they're values that get me up every morning. You know, I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson's early work where he talked about, meaning and responsibility, that's what gives your life validation. That's what gives it. That's why so many young men feel disenfranchised, because they don't have either of those things, meaning or responsibility. So I would say long answer, but you know, starting with some self-respect, starting with looking in the mirror and refusing to accept things that don't work for you, refusing to accept things that are at the detriment of your family, short term or long term, and understanding that this isn't going to be a quick fix. They're not going to go away. The fact that they're long planned means they'll have plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, and they will pivot and move as things change and as people resist or as people start to cotton on to what you're doing here. But that doesn't mean we just accept it and give up. We've got to accept, and for me, this is a life's work. I intend to still be doing this till I take my last breath, trying to make the world a better place. And I was like that before I had kids, but more so now because, essentially as a parent, you're raising your kids to live without you and without you being here one day, and you want to give them the best preparation to do that, and you want to leave the world in a better state than you arrived in, and that's my mindset. And I think that's a really positive thing to do. I think it's something that gives your life meaning and direction. And of course, there's challenges, but you feel part of something bigger than you.
So important. And I must say I've got a passion this year to really, particularly for those of us in the UK, because this is a local thing that you have to do, is really create a really good directory on food side of things where
Yeah.
people can get ethical, safe food. Like I've got a real big bee in my bonnet about, in the UK they're putting folic acid even in all flour-based products, even organic, but some of the small millers are exempt. And I've been going around telling everyone, and I've been amazed at how many people have been saying, "Oh, that's really good for the pregnant." But I'm not going to give up, and I'm going to get this
Yeah,
directed together so that people can actually support the businesses that are standing up against this nonsense. It's so important.
absolutely.
Now,
Well,
one
we're
thing,
quite.
sorry, come on.
So I was going to say we're quite lucky, aren't we? Where we both live in the
Yeah,
countryside, getting access to farm shops and local produce is a lot easier. And in the UK in general, with very fertile land, although we moaned about the rain at the top, it
yes,
does help in terms of that. So we are more fortunate than a lot of countries around the world. Like within 10 minutes of my house, I can get 3 or 4 different farm shops to get goods from. I know everyone's not in that position, but if you are, then absolutely, like you say, do your best to build relationships with people that are local.
yeah, although I've been quite shocked. Round here, it's not great. And with my
Oh,
daughter
really?
and I have been going on a mission to do it. And even a lot of the farm shops, when I then took the time to question what was in their flour, what was in their stuff, a lot of it wasn't good at all. So you
Oh,
do have
really?
to really ask the questions. I mean, it's quite frustrating because it takes so long to just buy your basic stuff now because
Yeah.
I was pretty horrified actually by when I dug deep with some of these farm shops. Some were brilliant, but some of them were not what I was expecting
Yeah.
at all. So now I can't not have this conversation. It's a very controversial one about the human antenna that Iconic was involved in.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant film. If someone hasn't seen The Human Antenna, go and watch it. And not, again, I want to stress, not from a place of fear because there are solutions. But I was lucky enough to spend a couple of weeks ago time seeing the latest testing, really with the team and things. And it is a real thing for everyone in terms of this nano that is inside of everyone at the moment and the
Mhm.
potential for what it can do and how people can get it out. What's your view on things like that and where it sits in the priority for people?
Well, I think it's very important. I think it's very important. Right from the beginning of the COVID narrative, it was researchers, alternative researchers, that were saying this is going to be used to justify a vaccine, and the vaccine is going to have some pretty unpleasant things in it. And we've obviously seen, a huge loss of life and a huge, really obvious impact of the jab in terms of people with physical disabilities. I know a few people myself who have experienced physical difficulties after having it, and I think what was not talked about anywhere near as much is the long term impacts and
Yeah.
the impacts of this nanotechnology, this graphene oxide that is in the jab. That most people don't know what graphene oxide even is, because it's not something that is listed as an ingredient for a start, and it's also not something that is a commonly known term. So graphene oxide, for people that aren't aware, is essentially a superconductor of electricity. So that's all of a sudden in the body. And we live in a world where we are now surrounded by electrical signals, electrical frequencies, electromagnetic frequencies in the form of radiation from whether it's satellites, whether it's cell phone towers, our mobile phones, Bluetooth, all of these things. Do you really think they're not going to have an interaction? Do you really think they're not going to have an impact with each other? You know, if you have two radio stations close on the dial and you put them near each other, they interfere with each other. You get the crackling. So on an energetic level, I would suggest that a very similar thing is happening with our bodies. And if our bodies are energetic beings, which, you know, I truly believe, I think the electric universe is a fantastic concept, the electrical universe. And I think the Heart Math Institute and the work they've done on a similar principle is very powerful. And electricity wants to be flowing in the same direction. It wants to be in harmony. It wants to be in balance. You know, how do you create things like electrical shortages and fuses blowing and things like that? That's created by surges in energy, by energy not being in balance and not being in harmony and not all flowing in the same direction. So if you've all of a sudden added in a foreign body which is going to act as a disruptor, that's only going to lead to side effects. Of course it is. And I don't know what you think, Catherine. Have you noticed a change in people's behavior in the
Yeah.
last few years as well? People seem a lot more aggressive.
Yeah.
People seem a lot more like there's, you know, there used to be the phrase in the 60s, the lights are on, but everyone's gone out.
Mm.
You know, people seem a lot more like that. They seem very vacant vessels. Not everyone, obviously, but I feel like I notice that more. And I probably notice it more when driving. The
Yes.
amount of people that apparently can't drive these days and do the most ridiculous things. And you look across at them and there's nobody at home. There's nobody in there. I see the same with children as well. There's a lot of children that you see and you feel quite sorry for. There's no one in there. It sounds harsh, but it's just basing on observation. But I think the jab is having an impact on all of those things. In terms of what we do about it, I'm a strong believer that consciousness overrides and can override everything. It's just a case of truly connecting to the true I rather than identifying with the body itself. So I think that's a big part of it. And also there is products out there. There is things being developed by people, including Masterpiece, which obviously is looked at in the human antenna, that has had some amazing results at getting this graphene and other things and these nodes out of the body. So I think, like I said with the previous question, that this is not a 5-minute job. This is something we're going to have to consistently
Yeah.
look at. I would say the same with getting this stuff out the body. You know, as you know, even before the vaccine, you know, detoxification is an ongoing process. You don't do one liver cleanse or go in the sauna once and you're free of all your toxins. It's an ongoing process. And I would suggest that getting this crap out the body, which I don't believe is just in the vaccine, you know,
It's not. I was
what's
there
in
at the latest
chemtrails.
testing. It's in literally every single person
Yeah.
that's been
What,
tested since 2021, whether they've had the swab up the nose, whether
yeah.
they've had the vax or anything. Yeah.
Well, I would suggest it's probably in chemtrails. I've
Mm.
heard a lot of evidence and I've spoken to dentists that talk about the fact it's been in local anesthetics used by dentistry for quite a number of years now
Yeah.
as well. So really I work on the premise this is in all of us. And I'm not ashamed to say that when Jesse and the team were at Ickonic a few months ago, I actually, after seeing everybody else get tested, went, I'm all right. Thanks.
Yeah.
I didn't actually get tested because I work on the assumption that I was the same as everybody else. And obviously I haven't had the jab myself. I wouldn't go anywhere near it. I've had none, to be fair, neither of my children. But I think, like I say, it's an ongoing process. And I try and treat this the same as any type of toxin in the body, mentally and spiritually try and override it, and also work on 5 cent solutions in terms of detoxification.
Yeah.
Whether that be, like I said, saunas, whether that be liver cleanses, whether that be foot baths, whatever it might be.
I couldn't agree more. And I love the fact that you brought into the consciousness aspect of this, because we all know the dark side cannot create. And there's so many natural solutions out there for people. And I just want to say, for people, if people are struggling health wise, there's solutions out there, some of which cost you absolutely nothing. But I think, as someone that's worked in holistic health for 25 years now, you know, modern problems do require some slightly different
Yep.
solutions sometimes. You've got to move with the time, but absolutely don't be scared about it, because, but if burying your head in the sand, if you're having issues, isn't always constructive at all. I mean, I could
100%.
talk to you for so long. I want to finish off by asking you, you've got some really exciting changes across your whole team, which is amazing. You will bring such different content to Iconic. Tell us what people can expect from Iconic in terms of the online platform, the physical events, the books, and some of the new shows you've got coming up.
Yeah, so at the moment, what we try and do is find a balance between keeping people informed of, what's going on in their daily lives, the daily news bulletins that may affect them, and also giving them tangible information that they can use to make changes to their lives, whether they be some of the things I've spoken about here, whether that be health related, consciousness related, or understanding deeper the stories that you're seeing in the news and how they fit into other stories that may appear completely unconnected. That's the job of Iconic, is to shine lights onto stories and information and people that don't have that in the mainstream. So we do obviously a combination of podcasts, of weekly news bulletins, daily news shows, and longer form series and documentaries as well. So the first part of the year, we've got a really busy period coming up. We have a couple of new podcasts launching in the next few weeks. I'm doing a podcast with my wife, which is going to go out weekly, which is going to be about all things kind of family and relationships and raising children, and trying to navigate the challenges and pitfalls that come with those, because I don't think there's many things that have changed more than relationships in the last few years, whether that be the way they're formed through technology and dating
Yeah.
apps that weren't a thing not long ago, whether that be the challenges that you face in 2026 as a married couple that you didn't face in 1956, but equally there's challenges you'd have faced in 1950 you don't face now. So how that's changed, how the public perception of, say, a mum who's decided to not to work and just stay at home and raise children, how that was considered something that was a fantastic thing to do. Now it's almost sneered at. How being a man has changed, how the difference between raising girls and boys,
Mm.
and how relationships in general. Because we were talking the other day, me and Beth, when we were planning our first few episodes, and pretty much everything in life comes back down to who you share it with. Whatever situation you can apply. You graduate from university. Who do you want to go and hug? You want to go and hug your mum and dad. You score the winner in a World Cup final. You want to go and hug your teammates. You want to share that moment with somebody. There's that great phrase, I can't remember it exactly, but did it really happen if nobody you care about saw it? And I think whether it be your work colleagues, your chosen family, like your partner and your friends, or your family through blood, your brothers, your sisters, your mum, your dad, your children, I think we can all do better at building and maintaining healthy relationships with them. I think, and me and Beth saw a massive opportunity with the amount of couples out there doing podcasts that are coming from a position of unrelatability. They'll be incredibly, wealthy TV stars that are completely unrelatable to most people, and they're preaching from a position of, we've got this great marriage and all these things, whereas we're sat here and we're going to talk about things that are very raw.
Mm.
And we've joked the choices were go to therapy ourselves or do a podcast and have it as a live therapy session with each other,
I love that.
um
I love that so much.
which is
Yeah.
kind of what we're going to do, because I'd like to think that we're quite relatable. We go through the same challenges that every couple does. In no way are we getting everything right. We still have arguments. We still disagree when it comes to the kids at times.
Mm.
Beth does my head in. I'm sure I do hers in. There's been times you think you're not going to necessarily go the distance, and I'm sure again she feels exactly the same. But I think talking about those things and being open about them is really, really important, and hopefully that will be something that people can find helpful and take something from. We've got a really interesting documentary that's coming out on the 7th of March as well, that's called Toxic. So Gareth had a guy on called Terry Edge a few months ago last year, who was talking about Grenfell Tower and
Mm.
how what really happened there in terms of what caused people to lose their lives wasn't the fire. It was the toxic chemicals coming off of the upholstery of the furniture within the houses.
Yeah.
Now, there is strict laws in pretty much every country in the world as to what chemicals and compounds can go into furniture. In the UK, they have different laws. We have much more lax laws. So what we have here in Britain, you couldn't buy in America, for example, in terms of the chemicals and the compounds and elements found within them. And there's a lot of evidence to show that as these chemicals seep and excrete when you're sat on them, sat on the sofa, whether you're sat in your car was another example given, your body is obviously absorbing these chemicals, and they're going to have a detrimental effect on them, whether they're endo disruptors, whether they're various different types of chemicals that are causing issues.
And can I
Um,
just say that is a huge issue for our animals as well, particularly not just the animals, sorry to interrupt, but that not just the animals that share our houses with us that are exposed to all these, but also it's a big issue for horses because all the rugs are covered in these chemicals
yes,
and things. So it's a massive, massive issue for our animals as well. Sorry to interrupt.
100%. It's a massive issue for everyone, and that's going to blow people's minds when that comes
Mm,
out, because most people buy a sofa and they buy it based on what it looks like and how comfy it is, and they sit on it and never think again. So the idea that essentially your house is a ticking time bomb. Not only
yeah,
are you sat in around those chemicals, is if this house goes up, what's going to kill you is probably not going to be the smoke. It's going to be
yeah,
the toxic chemicals coming off of these. So that's a really interesting. Obviously, it's a pretty heavy topic, but I think it's very important to talk about. Um, we've got so many projects we're working on. We've got another podcast coming back, all to do with health. We're producing a new series which I'm working on called The Lost World, which is looking at ancient civilizations and the whole concept of stories like Tartania and Atlantis and ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, the Ottoman Empire. All of these, are they hangovers of previous great resets or resets? So all these grand buildings and stone circles and massive places like the pyramids and Machu Picchu and all these things, are they signed, that no one can really explain how they were
yeah,
built, certainly not at the time with the resources or the population that we had at the time and the technology. Are they signs of previous resets?
mm,
So we're going to be doing a series on that, where hopefully we're going to be able to travel to some of these places, and the plan is to go and do some filming over at the Bosnian pyramids for that as well.
amazing.
And that's a real area of interest for me. It's not something I'm as rehearsed on as I am the subjects we've spoken about today, but it's something I'm incredibly interested in and want to learn more. So lots of different researchers will be joining me through the production of that series to give their insights on each of those things I mentioned and others. And hopefully that will be something that we'll produce ongoing, a series every year on that. We've got a fantastic documentary coming out on summer solstice, which I'll chat to you about more as we get closer, because I'd love to get you involved in the release of it, called Sunspiracy, which is been filmed down in New Zealand over Christmas and the first month of the year, which is all about this demonization of the sun that we have
Yeah.
been subjected to, and how is that actually a complete inversion of the truth and a complete inversion of reality. So that's going to come out, like I say, summer solstice, and we're planning to do an open air premiere for that somewhere here in the Midlands on the summer solstice.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to come. You have to come to it.
I will be coming to that, I'll tell you, in my full witch's outfit on my broomstick. Yeah, so no, and also it's there's so much stuff on Iconic. I think it's fantastic, and I really, really encourage everyone to join. I mean, honestly, there's so much information there for all age groups, actually. Particularly some of these series that you're doing for people that are homeschooling. This is going to be fantastic information for them as well.
I hope so. I mean, that's the one area that we'd like to go into. We'd like to go into to content that's specifically designed for a younger audience.
Yeah,
And I'm trying to encourage my wife and Gareth's wife, Gemma, who both of which are teachers or were teachers before we had both had children, to use some of those skills and some of
brilliant.
that knowledge of how broken the education system is, to try and create something a little bit alternative to that, to import. Because, like you say, there's so many kids homeschooled that whose parents just don't want them in the system, but maybe feel a bit lost as to, well, what should I be teaching them then?
Particularly
So I
since
think,
so much of this content is of so much interest to the parents as well, because they're going to be reschooling themselves at the same time, which is a
yeah,
win-win situation. Yeah,
yeah, I keep remember seeing those memes when it's like homeschool day one and it's on the whiteboard, Epstein didn't kill himself.
yeah,
And I think I think that's what we're like with our kids.
yeah,
Um,
fantastic. Yeah. Oh, there's so much to do. Now, just tell us about the tour. Have you got any tickets left for the tour left?
yes, there's a few. So we got 4 dates, two are sold out. Hull and Derby are sold out, with some tickets remaining for Gateshead up in the northeast and for Colchester just north of London.
Yeah,
They're the last two, I think. 28th of no 22nd of February is Gateshead, which is a Sunday. That's an evening afternoon show, 12 o'clock start, 4 o'clock finish. And then we have Colchester, which is on Sunday, the 8th of March, which is a 7 o'clock start and a 10 o'clock finish. So, yep, there's still tickets available for those two. We will be filming it as well, which will be available on Ickonic around April time.
Amazing. Get along to one of those if you can. There's nothing like going along and meeting like-minded people. I was at your last one that you did up in, where did we go for that? Was it
Liverpool.
Liverpool? Yeah. Got my mug. Actually won a mug. It was amazing in the
You
raffle.
did, you won a raffle, didn't you?
I
Yeah.
did. I won a raffle. I was so happy with my Iconic mug. So get along to those because I think, for me in the UK, there's a lot of people doing work on all these issues outside the UK, but those of us in the UK need to come together more and really build that in-person community as well as the online community because we live in a fantastic place. We've got such resourceful people here, such a knowledge place. So go along. All the stuff, I'll put the link to obviously to Iconic below. You can find it everywhere. Any final words you want to leave us with, Jamie?
Yeah, I'll give you the link to Human Antenna as well, and that's available for free to watch. So people can
Brilliant.
go ahead and watch that if they want. And like you say, not from a position of fear, but from a position that knowledge is important, and you'd rather have the knowledge and be able to do something with it than be ignorant and not. I don't see how knowledge can be taken as fear, even if it's dark information. I mean, the closing message, I guess, my message to people always is you've got to just take responsibility for yourself and unthink everything you've been told about how small you are and insignificant you are and unpowerful you are, and have a reevaluation of your identity in terms of what you're capable of, what you're worth, what people in your life bring to it. If you've got people in your life that are constantly making you feel small and insignificant, do they deserve or worthy of your time? If somebody is not going to be respectful with the influence they have on you, do they deserve to have any influence whatsoever? So I would suggest that. And I sound like I'm an old man. I'm only 33, but as I've got older, I've realised so much more than ever before how important the people you share your life with is. How important your family is. How important how those little moments that you probably don't think too much about in the moment, how important they are. And we live in a world where we are essentially conditioned to ignore those moments, really, because it's always about the next big thing, the next important thing, when sometimes the most important thing is doing nothing and spending time with the people you care about. Like, for example, this morning, the studio I'm sat in here is in my back bedroom, and I have a breakfast show every day, which I normally leave the house around 5 a.m. to go and do. So I don't ever really see my kids in the morning.
Mm.
Today, for the first time, I recorded it here in my home studio. So I recorded it about 5. I heard my son, who's there in the room behind. I heard him slowly get up about 6. So I'd finished recording the show. I got up, I went downstairs. We played football in the lounge, and I had a coffee, and I spent a couple of hours with them this morning before they went to school at 8. And then I went into the office and started my day. I haven't done that for probably a year.
Mm.
And just that little moment of being able to see them in the morning, have a kickabout, sit with them while they're having their breakfast, talk about what they've got going on at school, that meant so much. Yet previously, that would have been it's just a standard morning.
Mm.
Whereas I think you start to realize as you get older and you realize how important those moments that you probably didn't necessarily appreciate at the time
Yeah.
are. So that would be my one bit of advice, is that sometimes waking up and smelling the roses and just stepping off the hamster wheel, metaphorically, for a minute and looking around can be so empowering. And it can be so refreshing as well if you're burned out and if you're feeling disengaged, disenfranchised, and worthless. It's just taking a second to look back sometimes and go and see how far you've come from,
Mm.
and where you began to where you are today, and how much you still have to go. But from a positive perspective of life can only get better from here. We've not at the glass ceiling yet. We've still got a lot of room to grow and improve and all of those things. If you look at life from that perspective, then I don't see how you can not have a positive mindset. And it's not me preaching. Like everybody, you have challenges and you wake up some days and really can't be bothered, or you wake up and see a news story, or like I said, covering that Epstein story, reading that file at 5:30 on a Monday morning. I was like, geez, it's Monday morning, it's 5:30 and you're reading about this darkness. Of course you have challenges, but fundamentally we're here. I believe spiritually we all chose to be here at this time to take part in what's about to come. So we've all equally got an important part to play. So let's have that mindset and get on with it.
Love it. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've enjoyed that. I hope all the listeners who stuck with us through this, if this resonates with you, please do share. We need more positive, uplifting conversations like this. So thank you so much, Jamie, and thanks for everyone listening. Bye. Hi, everyone. It's Catherine here. And to really quickly share something that's so important to me. I love hosting this podcast because it allows us all to explore those big questions, challenge our programming, and uncover the natural truths that truly empower us. But did you know my real passion's working one-on-one with animals and people, helping you or your animal cut through the noise, find the root cause of imbalances, stress, illnesses, or really just create a personalized plan that actually works for you. So whether you're here for your own healing or you're a dedicated animal guardian, wanting the very best for your dog, cat, horse, any four-legged or scaled or winged companion, I'm here for you both. I work with animals and humans, but I especially love helping the animals thrive. That is my real happy place. So my recharge and reset consultations and online courses are packed with practical tools, printable resources, lifelong access, and the main thing is you'll never feel alone on this journey. And they work. Just head over to my website and check out the testimonials. So if you're really ready to take action and not just listen, head over to catherineedwards.life, that's Catherine with the C and .life at the end, and explore my courses and consults. Or if you want to, book a free 15-minute chat to see if I can help. Because it's really important we stop outsourcing our health, really look after our animal companions better than before, and start leading by example. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And if you feel inspired, please do share with your friends and family. This helps us spread the word and also helps me encourage some exciting new guests to take part in this podcast. And above all, stay curious and stay free.